Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for another rendition of the B&H Virtual Event Space. I am very excited to be joined today by Matt Dieterich himself. Matt, thanks for being here at B&H.
Thanks for having me, guys. This is awesome.
Yeah, we're very excited. Matt is going to be talking today about astrophotography in national parks. So the warmer weather is coming for most of us. It's getting nice out. You know, we can go outside, stay outside a little bit longer, full moons and things like that. We're experiencing all kinds of awesome natural events out in the world. So Matt will kind of dive into that and show us how to, get some better pictures there. So really looking forward to that. Everybody who's joining us here on Zoom, Facebook, YouTube, all of the different media channels that we're streaming out to right now, make sure you go ahead, drop any comments you have in the chat for Zoom. You know how to use the Q&A tab already. Before I kick it over to Matt, I just want to give a special, very belated birthday to our very own Danny. So happy birthday to Danny. Everybody show him some love in the comments. Without any further ado, I'm going to give it over to Matt and take away the floor.
Sounds great. Let's share this. All right. Hopefully you guys can see all that.
We see it. It looks beautiful. Perfect. Already.
Well, now do I need to hide this upper menu? Let's see. Hide controls menu. Perfect. Well, I think it's just awesome to be part of, this webinar today with B&H. It's been a dream to just set a time and work with you guys and share a little bit of my experience with astrophotography, and hopefully to get you guys inspired to go check out the night sky and explore the natural resources that we have, especially in the United States. But if you're watching from overseas, of course, the dark skies where you live. So a little bit of background on this presentation. My goal is to inspire you to get out and explore the national parks. And with that in mind, I want to try to leave you with some tips and tricks for adjusting camera settings and also how to plan your astrophotography shoot. So I think that's an important thing, whether you're a beginner or, an intermediate or even an advanced astrophotographer, you can hopefully use this presentation to be inspired to go shoot some new compositions in our national parks, because they're really amazing resources for shooting the night sky. And of course, what's a presentation on astrophotography without actually sharing some cool astrophotography from the national parks? So that will be near the end, and of course, continue throughout the whole talk. A lot of times when I give presentations, I like to give a little bit of background so people can relate to the experience of how did a journey start in photography, because everyone's is a little bit different. So I think it's kind of funny looking back that when I was a kid, I really started to become passionate about astronomy just because the what ifs and the unknowns and in the scales. I mean, I would look at astronomy books in libraries and that sort of thing. And of course, the photos just blew my mind. And that was back when, the Hubble Space Telescope was really starting to take a lot of images. But I joke to folks that false advertising got me into the hobby of astrophotography, because a small telescope that I got for Christmas when I was a kid came in this box, and the box had this amazing photo for advertising on the front of it. And that's what I imagined that I was going to see with my own eyes, with my naked eyes through the telescope. And of course, little did I know that, well, that was actually a camera for very, very long exposures to capture those images, 15, 16 years ago. And that was kind of my first entry point into astrophotography and to the hobby of, well, this isn't going to be easy at all. And I can't just look up in the night sky and kind of see these very, very faint objects. So in 2007, I wanted to capture images and share them with people and educate them about what I was seeing in the night sky. So that's kind of what kickstarted my experience. And in 2008, looking back at this first photograph, was my first photograph of a deep space object. And for those of you that are into astrophotography, or even know, I mean, looking at this photo, I look back because it's horrendous. There's this field rotation going on because the mount wasn't polar aligned. This was from a dark sky site in Cherry Springs, Pennsylvania. So the Milky Way was just beautiful overhead and arcing, but I was still so thrilled, even though looking back, this photograph, there was so much to improve upon. But I implore you, keep those images. If you're just starting astrophotography, keep them and save them, because you can really look back on all those photographs that you've taken and see how much improvement you've had. And I think that's the most important thing we can do as astrophotographers or artists in general, is continue your improvement and look back at old images or old pieces of artwork that you created. So I really thought astrophotography was going to be easy in 2008. Little did I know it would change my life forever and become this addiction. So I started to take photographs with a digital camera, and I started to find some patterns that I was looking online. I was using, Yahoo groups, all these little forums to learn about astrophotography. And what I found was, number one, you need dark skies. And number two, you want to try to collect as much light as possible with a big telescope. I mean, that was a few of the biggest tips and tricks that I found when I was photographing the night sky in the suburbs of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So it was incredible, kind of an eye-opening experience. I was like an aha moment to finally realize, okay, if I take these three ingredients, I can come out with hopefully a pretty respectable photo that is improved upon from my next photo. And I started to use that recipe. And this was one of the first ones that was, like 3 hours of data from Pittsburgh, and was the Orion Nebula. So it's one of the most bright nebula in the night sky, and it's in the belt of Orion, just below it in the sword of Orion. So you can photograph this with a telephoto lens, even from bright suburbs. But I saw that that was an option to improve upon, and getting equipment to dark skies in 2012, down to Spruce Knob, West Virginia, I would use the telescope and photograph. This shot was the Andromeda Galaxy. So it's one of the closest galaxies to our own Milky Way, and it's incredibly bright. So you don't need really, really huge equipment to photograph it, but the dark skies, that was what I found was huge, and just beautiful Milky Way from this location. So just a little bit of exposure time with a telescope allows you to capture that crazy cool Andromeda Galaxy shot. And taking a step forward, over the years, astrophotography has always, I've always come back to it. It's kind of been my foundation, or the rock for something that inspires me and that I enjoy working towards. So over the years, I wasn't happy with my geology job, and I just really wanted to try to get involved with trying to work with astrophotography and telescopes. And in 2008, I was fortunate enough to join with Planewave Instruments, who, that's my full-time job. We manufacture telescopes for observatories and amateurs all over the planet. And some of these photographs were ones that I captured from Chile under the beautiful dark skies down there. And just some of the recent, installations that we've done, it's a humbling experience to realize that I started out with this tiny little telescope in my parents' backyard to, working for Planewave Instruments, who makes just the highest end telescopes, for amateurs and universities and government agencies across the planet. So it's amazing to have that experience and to continue the passion and see it in other people when we go out and do installations. So that's kind of the present day. But of course, my camera always comes along with me on those trips, and I like sharing the behind the scenes. So a lot of my shooting back in, it's almost been 10 years now, but I was doing deep space, but then I really wanted to show people, okay, what's the experience like behind taking a telescope to dark skies and photographing the dark sky areas like in West Virginia, and photographing deep space objects like nebulae and galaxies. So I started to take what's called nightscape photos, and I didn't realize that was a thing back then. This was with an old Canon XSI, the 450D, this old school camera, very noisy. The ISO is maximum, runs at like 1600. It's incredible how just that ISO under dark skies allow me to photograph the Milky Way scene here. Just, okay, it's tracked and I have it kind of tilted against the horizon, but that little silhouette on the horizon, they're just trees. So I joke saying that, well, that's my first nightscape images because it has a foreground element. And that was the reason for kind of getting scale for people to see the night sky. And by 2014, I wanted people to fully relate to the night sky in the scale. So I started taking panorama images, and this is from that same dark sky location at Spruce Knob that I started using. This was a Nikon D 800 for those shots. And the scale and putting human elements into the shots for Nightscapes really inspired me and allowed me to showcase the experience behind dark skies. And that's something special that in general the national parks like help us offer and provide our dark skies. So in 2015, finished graduate school, did my master's in geology, and I always dreamed of traveling to the national parks and taking my camera equipment with me and showcasing the beauty. I mean, all of us probably grew up watching documentaries or seeing something that inspired us about nature and exploring the United States. And for me, this was my one opportunity finally to kind of pursue something that I was really passionate about. So I went over to Mount Rainier National Park to work as a night sky interpretive ranger, and I hit up a few of these national parks along the way. So in this presentation, you'll see some of those examples. And of course, that was such a tipping point for realizing how special the national parks are for protecting the night skies and resources for us to enjoy as a community. Now, one of the funny things I remember talking about when I would give presentations is at Rainier was the analogy of national parks being islands, especially for night skies. Islands in the sense that national parks are protecting the resources where surrounding areas, have to abide by kind of some of these national park rules and regulations to protect the resources in number one, of course, within the national park boundaries, but they are islands in terms of protected resources where we can go and explore the wilderness and the outdoors, unlike, anything that we kind of have available to us, whether human development can degrade and impact it. So the national parks are such a hot spot for night skies, especially out west. So this photo shows some of the light pollution. I'm sure you guys have maybe seen this, that the white areas on this light pollution map are pure white. So that's like downtown cities. And then of course you get out west where there's so few lights and the cities are scattered more that you can experience darker night skies where there is the Milky Way visible, which is a galaxy that we live in. So national parks are such a huge aspect to protecting the resources. And of course, for astrophotographers, that's so incredible because we need dark skies to photograph the Milky Way. Now, to kind of get started with astrophotography, and if you live in a light polluted area, if you want to find dark skies, you can utilize Dark Site Finder. It's a great website. It has just a GIS map with light pollution overlays. I've used it globally. I've used it even when I was in Australia. So you can use that website for planning. Where can I find dark skies to photograph the Milky Way? And you can see this for national parks as well. And the national parks kind of has their own division called the Night Sky and Natural Sound Division. And they're here to protect the night skies in addition to the natural sounds in the national park. So if you're looking for resources to plan and experience a national park with good dark skies, of course, check out nps.gov. And there's also the International Dark Sky Association, who is the forefront nonprofit for protecting the night skies. So these are three good resources that I implore you to go check out and utilize for planning a location to check out the night sky and photograph in a national park. Now that you might have a location picked out, say you want to go photograph the night sky at Bryce Canyon in Utah, and you have your camera equipment, but you're also scratching your head if you're kind of new to the hobby of, well, what gear and what camera settings. So a lot of times I like shooting with either my Nikon equipment or like a D850. I more recently started using a Spencer's camera modified A7S III, which is a Sony, very sensitive in low light because the pixels are very big. So when you plan your trip, make sure that you obviously have plenty of batteries, sturdy tripod, a ball head, and a shutter cable release is very helpful as well for doing long exposures of the night sky. And of course, if you're hiking and, going into the backcountry, make sure you carry the 10 essentials when you're hiking and let people know where you're going in terms of safety. That's one question I always get commonly is, how do I safely, visit these national parks at night? With some of them don't have cell phone service. So just be careful, plan, look at the weather, let people know where you're going at night and when you expect to return. And of course, a headlamp with a red light setting is huge for saving your night vision when you're working in the dark. And from there, you can use wide angle lenses are always very beneficial when you start astrophotography, because they're very forgiving in terms of minimizing the star trailing that you get from static tripod shots. So if you're using a full frame camera, check out using like a 14 millimeter lens or even a 24 millimeter lens. I like using, and with those camera lenses, I usually do like a 30-second shot at ISO 6400 with an f2.8 lens, which is like a Nikon 14 24 millimeter lens, just an incredibly beautiful lens for astrophotography. And you can also utilize some higher focal length lenses like a 50 millimeter lens. And when you step up in that focal length range, remember, of course, you're zooming in on the night sky, which means as the Earth is turning, you're going to get stars trailing sooner in your images as you increase focal length. Like that 50 millimeter lens, you can usually get away with like 8 seconds, 6 seconds, depending on the camera that you're running with. But you can get some cool photographs of this forced perspective, like small people against the massive Milky Way. You can do that sort of vantage point with that kind of equipment. When your equipment is dialed in and packed and ready, you also want to try to plan. I mean, I apologize if a lot of you guys might know these softwares already or these apps, but I'd like reminding people that Stellarium is a great planetarium software that you can use on your laptop, and you can go back in time and you can go forward in time to plan and see where the Milky Way is going to be at for any given date and time. And it's a great resource for astrophotographers, for nightscapes, but also for deep space if you're doing more high focal length shooting in national parks with the night sky. So Stellarium is a great resource. And then when you're on site, one of the ones I use most is PhotoPills, and that is an incredible piece of software that those guys have written and supported over the last handful of years, because that view on the right is just a screenshot from my phone of the viewpoint from Bryce Canyon. And last, I guess it was a month and a half ago, we were in Utah, and I wanted to see what time is the Milky Way going to rise over this trail. And with PhotoPills, you can use the augmented reality and plan exactly the time and go out and see that exact location with the Milky Way over that rock. And you can do some amazing planning, like with the moon over certain objects, like, landmarks and cities. People get a lot of those shots by planning ahead. And if you look for those kind of routes in national parks, you can really plan some special shots by visualizing and planning ahead, because that really makes sure that you're preparing yourself ahead of time. Now, scouting in the day in national parks is incredible because, number one, you're in a national park and you get to experience the beautiful scenery that you have. But when I like to go to parks and shoot, I like to keep a list and, get a park map and remember, okay, hey, this is a cool rock formation. Maybe I can get the Milky Way from here. So I'll scout during the daytime. And then at night, I'll go back to those handful of locations that I made a list of, and I'll capture my shots. And then I feel positive about my experience when I can kind of check off those shots that I captured. But scouting in the daytime is a great recommendation, so you can get a lay of the land and remember kind of seeing what's safe. And a lot of these national parks don't have gates or anything like that, protecting you, or rails from like some of these drop-offs. So scouting in the daytime is a lot safer than roaming around at dark without having previously experienced that park before. So once you scout and have your equipment packed, when you're there on site, think about how you want to actually shoot the night sky. So do you want to capture just a single frame, a single shot of the Milky Way over a landscape? Do you want to create a panorama? And a panorama is just a very wide field of view by taking numerous photos. Do you want to take a time-lapse video of the Milky Way setting or rising over a certain landmark? What about star trails? I mean, star trails are another beautiful type of editing where you can get beautiful rotation in the night sky as the Earth turns. Or nowadays, we have these awesome portable trackers for taking long exposures. And long exposures, remember, means more detail more color, and you can use lower ISOs. So lower ISO means higher dynamic range, and that is what gives you more color in the images because the sensor is recording a higher dynamic range of that scene. And of course, less noise. So tracked shots open up a new world to national parks in terms of astrophotography and experiencing the night skies. So single shots versus panorama. Single shot, like on the top left, it's a single 30-second shot, beautiful composition, easy to frame, easy to create stunning viewpoints over some of these landmarks at national parks. But remember, some of these landmarks are like massive. This bottom photo of these beautiful sedimentary rocks at Badlands National Park, the Milky Way was just arcing over it. So, I'm standing there and it's like, okay, well, how do I actually capture this whole scene? This is one of the first panoramas that I took. And looking back, I didn't take another bottom row. I would have liked to kind of get the base of that sedimentary rock formation. So, but the arcing Milky Way, I wanted to showcase that. So a panorama was the method to capture that scene. And of course, that beautiful, crazy green air glow was out that night. Panoramas, some of you might already have a lot of experience shooting them, but with night skies, they are so fun because the Milky Way is so vast across the night sky that you might want to capture a panorama to showcase that arcing Milky Way across a beautiful formation in a national park. So commonly, I run with either 14 or 24 millimeter lens. More recently, I've been using 50 millimeter lenses for panoramas, but I'll get into that later down the line. Figure out how you want to compose the shot. When you're there in the field, level the tripod. That is very key. Level your tripod and ball head, and then focus the camera with live view and focus this on a really, really bright star. And you can dial in your focus, make sure it's set to manual mode so you don't accidentally do autofocus, because autofocusing at night on a star is darn near impossible. But I've seen some new cameras be able to do it. But zooming in with live view, you can quickly manually rotate your lens focus ring. You can capture your first frame and see how it looks, look at the exposure, and you move your camera to the next exposure. And the key is to overlap. Because you're taking multiple images, the only way that you can stitch the photographs is if there's overlap of about 30%. So I'd rather have a little bit more overlap than not enough, because then you might have a hole in the panorama. So to give you an idea of the overlap, I made this kind of little animation with the top being the complete panorama and a square kind of representing the single exposures that I was doing. And the single raw exposures are seen here on the bottom. And this was with a Nikon D750 and a 14 millimeter lens. So you can see I started out on one side and I just manually moved the camera between photos. And between each photo, just overlap enough. You could see each frame has some of the previous frame in it. And that way, the software that you use can stitch and recognize the adjacent frames. So you can see the crazy air glow in the exposures. It's just going from left to right, and even a little bit of northern lights, a little bit of aurora borealis on that left-hand side to the north, which was crazy cool to see. And that's it. Just overlap enough and take more than you think you need. Because remember, you always want to crop in and think about if you want to make a print of those images. So panoramas, great way, super high resolution. So you can make massive prints and hang them on the wall for people. That is one of the benefits of panoramas over single exposures for astrophotography. Now, getting into time lapses. Maybe you said, okay, I want to sit back and just stargaze while my camera fires away. Now, that's one thing that I did with time lapses. So you can shoot a time lapse movie, have a time lapse, and then also make a star trails photo. So you could do like two cool things with the time lapse footage. And there's technically a third thing you can do of making a time lapse video with like star trail effects, and it's pretty cool. And I just posted one of those examples on my Instagram yesterday night. So if you want to check that kind of video out, you can just check it out on my Instagram page. But star trails, beautiful method for showcasing the rotation of the Earth over time. And this one was from Joshua Tree National Park. And last but not least of that, how do I want to capture the scene? I mentioned tracked exposures. Now, I added this into the presentation because I think I'm seeing a lot of people shooting with trackers now, and a lot of people wondering, how do I polar align? And that polar alignment is how you make sure these little equatorial mounts are aimed towards Polaris, if we're in the northern hemisphere, to get pinpoint stars, because that's kind of where the axis of the Earth rotates about, is near the North Star. So you can do these super cool long exposures, and this is just my I was using the Nikon Z6, 50 millimeter lens on one of these trackers, and you just put on your tripod, face it north, polar align it, and then you can take these crazy long exposures. And I stacked 45 3-minute photos. So it's pretty cool what you can do with those tracked exposures to showcase deep exposure detail in the night sky. Especially, this was a constellation of Orion, and with a modified camera you can really see this hydrogen alpha, this dark nebulae in that area of Orion, which is pretty cool. So I know I just threw a lot at you, and the editing is kind of where I realized over the years is where I struggled the most, because there's so many new techniques and ways to edit. So if you ever have questions on how to edit once you have that data from the field, then I have some tutorials on my YouTube. If you want to go over there and check that out, feel free to always send me a message if you have questions about editing. But I've been trying to create a database and resources on my YouTube channel to showcase how to edit some of these astrophotographs. So that's one resource if you have questions about editing. But there's so many amazing astrophotographers on YouTube, Alan Wallace, Astro Backyard, so many astrophotography folks on YouTube that you can use as resources for planning and editing your photographs. So let's dive into actually some of these example photographs now that we have an idea on, we need our equipment packed. We need to make sure that we plan ahead to figure out how we want to, compose a scene and plan. Those are the huge things with these national parks, is planning and figuring out a best time of year. So, and then last but not least, kind of when you're on site, take your time, take a deep breath. I always remember doing that to the folks at Rainier, of when we do the star parties at that national park, always letting people take a huge deep breath before we stargaze, because we're doing something really cool that we don't get experience every day. So enjoy the experience about being under those dark skies, and let the camera do all the work while you stargaze. It's pretty fun. This was one of the example shots, 30-second photo. ISO 6400 was the common setting I used to use with my Nikon D750. And just that Nikon 14 millimeter lens, just a beautiful lens for astrophotography. And the air glow in Badlands was just very, very special. Amazing dark skies there, and the sedimentary rocks are just spectacular foreground scenery. So going back to the scouting and the planning. So this shot kind of goes to that location where I scouted in the daytime and went back and shot it, of the Milky Way over the rocks there. So you have the air glow, you have the Milky Way, you have these light domes from these cities on the horizon. And then on the left, you have the Northern Lights. So it was one of the coolest things, catching that little bit of pink from the Northern Lights on the horizon. But remember, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail when you're out there in the field. So take your time and realize you're in a beautiful national park, and try to think through what you're trying to tell through your photograph, or through the tracked exposure, or maybe through the time-lapse video that you're going to create. So plan and get out there and just have fun, because these national parks have crazy cool locations for scouting and showcasing the beautiful dark skies. And case in point, Glacier National Park has insane dark skies, some of the darkest I've seen. And this particular night, again, there was this crazy green air glow, and this is visible to the camera. Now, to the human eye, I can't see the green, but the green is from oxygen molecules kind of re-radiating energy that they soaked up from the sun during the daytime. So it's kind of like asphalt giving off heat after it's been soaking and baking in the sun all day. It's kind of a similar effect when it gives off energy in a different wavelength. So with this, the Milky Way was overhead. I did a 4-panel mosaic. So I just did 1 panel, 2 panel, 3 panel, 4 panel, stitched them together, and just beautiful landscape. And down here by the lake, up above this hillside, my buddy, for scale, to just give you an idea, just my buddy standing there, it's just the scale of these mountains in the Milky Way is impressive, with tiny little person in the foreground. eventually got over to Mount Rainier National Park after working on that long drive to get there. So we set up, we did star parties every clear night. We taught astrophotography. We did workshops. And of course, every clear night when I got done working, I would just go roam the national park there and go set up time lapses and photograph the night sky. It was incredible. And I implore you guys in general, a lot of these national parks, barely anyone goes out at night. You'll find during that whole summer, 4 or 5 months, I only ran into a couple people, like a handful, no more than 5 people outside at night when I was done working. So a lot of times you have the park to yourself, which is pretty amazing for an astrophotographer. So with this shot, you don't need to travel far. This was right off the side of the road. This was Box Canyon, beautiful Milky Way, arcing over this canyon at Mount Rainier National Park. Beautiful air glow as well over the horizon, and just these beautiful evergreens. Just a spectacular location of Mount Rainier, especially under the dark skies with no moon in the night sky. You can take those beautiful panoramas and really go crazy and overboard. This was 12 14 millimeter shots, and I had the camera in portrait mode, and I would just take the shots going through that method I showed you of overlapping them, because the northern lights were absolutely popping on the left and the Milky Way was arcing overhead, and then there was air glow. So there was like these 3 phenomenon going on that I wanted to capture. And of course, I moved all the way over to get the final shot with Mount Rainier on the right-hand side. And you could see like these trails. If you zoom in on the shot, you could see people summiting Rainier, starting from one of the base camp. I think it's Camp Sherman on that east side of Rainier. So crazy idea to just photograph this really big scene of the Milky Way, but it worked out well because of these elements in this path, this leading line into the forest there, I thought was pretty spectacular. A similar experience. This was the Northern Lights from Reflection Lake and Mount Rainier. A little bit of air glow, some Milky Way. You get Andromeda Galaxy in the background. Just a spectacular lake if you can get there with no wind at night, and you can get the stars or the Milky Way reflecting in it. It's a pretty special location. And using a mosaic technique, I did that 17 image panorama. So a pretty cool method for photographing that lake and getting down below as well. And I shot more images than I needed, because with this, I cropped in kind of on this 3:2 ratio, because now I can make a beautiful print out of this with a standard print shop. So it's easy to crop in and send to a print shop to get done and send out to a client for that ratio. So shoot more than you need when you're there in a national park, because you don't know when you're going to get back. And of course, you don't want to be wishing that you shot a little bit of extra frames for mosaic on the left or right when you're back home months later. So hopefully this video plays, but this was from the night of June 23rd, and I captured, ended up seeing the Northern Lights. There was this guy from Germany up at the star party who wanted to take a photograph for the first time of the night sky. We set his camera up, took a photo, and he had this pink color in the sky. And of course, I realized that he just captured the Northern Lights in his first astrophotograph, which is crazy. So in this video, I ran down to the lake and I wanted to face to the north, and that was where the Northern Lights were coming down from. So I set up that Nikon D750 and just let it shoot photo after photo with just 8-second photographs and no delay between them. Actually, 1 second. There was a 1 second delay between photos, so the photographs can write to the memory card without the buffer overloading. So ran down, set this up, first time ever seeing the actual Northern Lights in person, and it was black and white. It was like someone had a spotlight and it was just shining to the side of Rainier. So if you watch, you can see these pillars of light just kind of articulating, and just ridiculous. As dawn starts to approach, you get the Mount Rainier climbers starting to summit with their headlamps. I thought that was pretty amazing to see and photograph during that time-lapse video. Play it one more time for you guys. This is pretty cool, seeing the fog roll across Reflection Lake and just the columns, the curtains of the pink Northern Lights happening that night. It was just a moment I'll never forget. So with that data set, I ironically made my first star trails photo. And that's what I said about that static tripod. You can take a time-lapse video and turn it into a star trails shot. And this was the first star trails shot I ever did, after having a teacher tell me back 15 years or 10 years before in astronomy class to, take a star trails photo. They're the easiest ones you can capture. So I'm glad I waited to create the first star trail shot, because this had the element of the star trails going on, but with the northern lights in the background. I thought was crazy, and it was there reflecting off of Reflection Lake too. That's how bright the northern lights were that evening. So with that data set, the national park ended up wanting to use it for a stamp. They were celebrating the centennial, the 100-year anniversary of the Park Service. So they asked if they could use it, and they ended up putting it on the sheet of the 16 images to celebrate the 2016 centennial. So when you photograph the night sky, I implore you, this was my learning experience, that people look at our photography as artwork, and this can inspire other people to get outside and experience nature, and in general, just, experience something that we don't get to experience all the time in our daily work lives of being indoors. So share your artwork, because you just don't know who is going to see it, who's going to pick it up, and who's going to reshare it. You have the power with your photography to inspire people. And I think that is one of the most life-changing things that we can do as artists is share our images in one sense or the other. So same kind of example with this meteor shower time-lapse photo I took. I blended in all the meteors, and I didn't think it really looked that good, but I had to manually take each photograph and align it. And I sent it in to NASA and their astronomy picture of the day. And this was only weeks after, sending it in for the stamp stuff for the park. And lo and behold, they ended up using this for that NASA APOD. And it was a humbling experiencing the folks just seeing the image online and realizing again that people look at photography and this, what I thought was mainly just science with astrophotography, as an art form. So again, just another example, make sure that you share your work, get it out in the community, make prints of it, put it in a local coffee shop, anything you can do, because that's going to inspire a kid. It's going to inspire an adult to get outside and experience the outdoors in something that they can bring them joy and peace. That's kind of the way I look at the night sky in general. So, going back to, a trip that my girlfriend and I did just a month ago was going to Zion for a night, and luckily it cleared. So I photographed, the Milky Way in a tracked exposure. I used the tracker to take a 60-second shot, and the Milky Way was just spectacular. And this photograph to me just it kind of is essence of Zion in general, of the beautiful canyons and the little light pollution glow of Springdale on the Watchman. So it's just kind of a spectacular location and national park to get into and explore and experience the dark night skies. And Zion just received their dark sky certification. So they're now finally International Dark Sky Association certified for their dark skies. So they've worked many years to achieve that status. So now all the, I believe, national parks in Utah have that IDA nonprofit certification, which takes a long time, a lot of effort, and a lot of grassroots effort to protect the night skies there. So check out Zion if you guys haven't yet for dark skies. This one I just kind of wrapped up. This was from our trip as well. We had one night at Zion, one night at Bryce. I mentioned about panoramas with a 50mm lens. This one was pushing the boundaries. This was 120 photographs. So I used an automatic panorama rig to manually make sure I had the overlap correct, because you can imagine 50mm lens, it's a lot of magnification to make sure you have all the overlap between photographs and overlap between 150. So, but that Spencer's camera modified Sony A7S III, it sees in the dark. That camera is scary. I still want to re-edit this photograph. I wanted to at least show it to you guys, because the experience, this was windy. It was like 20 degrees out, crazy wind from Bryce Point, but the arcing Milky Way over the valley and over the hoodoos, just a beautiful location with air glow in the background again. So it was a wild experience for sure. Another Utah park, checking out Arches National Park, another panorama from Delicate Arch. And some clouds were passing that night, but still a beautiful scene and location to experience the night skies, and in general, the sedimentary rocks and geology that Utah has to offer. It's an awesome national park to check out. Death Valley. I went here in March a few years ago, because at least it wasn't like 120 degrees out. I slept in the truck and got out, like 3 or 4 a.m. right before the sun rose to get the Milky Way rising just above the rock formation here and over the road. So Death Valley is another cool national park to check out. And obviously during the daytime is incredible. So you have light pollution from Vegas kind of off in the horizon there, but still beautiful dark skies, even though you're below sea level from that area in Badlands or Badwater Basin there in Death Valley. Now in 2020, I guess that was already last year, 2020. So I ended up going to Craters of the Moon to document the dark skies there as an artist in residence. So luckily, Comet Neowise was going into the night sky at that point in time in July. So, I packed all my camera equipment and, the girlfriend and I, luckily she was a trooper and would stay up all night and we photographed the night sky. And it's funny because she would end up like sleeping randomly on, in the truck or in the truck bed or on the ground while I was out there like shooting these photographs for the National Park Service there. But beautiful dark skies. They had crazy air glow going on with a comet. And then I did that all sky view. You can do these panoramas and turn them into full sky views to showcase kind of light pollution on the horizon and air glow. So it's a neat little technique if you take ample photographs to collect images. This one was another big panorama, 77 images showcasing the Milky Way arcing over the spatter cones and Inferno cone at Craters of the Moon there. Crazy cool dark skies. You have a little bit of light domes from like Arco, and then I think Idaho Falls, some of those little towns up that way. But amazing landscape and dark skies. And again, I don't think we ran into all but 1 or 2 or 3 people during that week we were there at night. So again, you have the national parks a lot of times to yourselves at night to get out there and experience. The forced perspective shots in national parks for astrophotography. You can use that 50 millimeter lens and get up on a hillside and photograph yourselves or an object against the Milky Way, or in this case was Comet Neowise. So this was a single exposure. Girlfriend and I had her go up the hill and I set my intervalometer to just keep shooting a few shots. And I ran up the hill of the rock to make sure I could get at least one shot. And this was probably one of my most memorable experiences with her at the park. Just beautiful with Comet Neowise, big and bright like that. And on the right was just another mosaic. I did tracked shots with a little equatorial tracker for that one. So it was pretty cool. Now, with a lot of these national parks, I've loved the experience of getting people into them to experience and showcase. So if you ever have questions or want to join us on a trip, feel free to check out my website and join us on a workshop. We'd love to have you here under the dark skies, checking out what Mother Nature presents to us every night. And just like to thank you guys for having me on the talk and, of course, for joining me today. So thank you guys so much. And I appreciate everything that the national parks do for protecting the night skies. So I hope you guys get out and experience them this summer. Check them out. We have the Milky Way in the night sky. Perfect timing, June, July, August. The Milky Way is up early, so you won't have to wake up at like 3 a.m. to check out the Milky Way. But reach out if you guys have questions. I'm always available to help and offer assistance.
Awesome, Matt. Thank you. That's where I'll start. I'll start with saying thank you very much.
Yeah.
But wow. I don't know if anybody else feels that way, but I know I'm just absolutely I'm speechless. Absolutely beautiful work. It's tough usually. We were in the green screen room, so to speak, before, and I it's hard to shut me up. So the work is absolutely beautiful and amazing, and congratulations on everything you've achieved. Mark is joining us from Zoom and wanted to ask you, in terms of the photos that you're taking, are most of the photos you take taken with a star tracker, or you sticking strictly to tripod? How do you typically set that up?
When I started a lot of the national park stuff, I mainly did single shots. So, all of these are, sorry, untracked. So all of these were untracked, like these Badlands photos. These were just untracked 30-second, or I did 50-second photos. I pushed the boundaries of that lens because I got some trailing, but more lately I've been doing tracked exposure. So like this one, case in point, just a month ago, tracked 60-second exposure. And then if you turn the tracker off, you can do a longer static shot of the ground. So you blend in to make sure the foreground stays sharp. So more recently, I've been using a tracker, but I still do a mix. Trackers offer deeper images, and you could be more creative with them.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk to you. You mentioned this early on, when you go and you set up and you take a picture, most of this stuff, the greens, the yellows, the pinks, all those colors that come out in the photos aren't necessarily, you're not going to see that with the naked eye. It's something that, the cameras, it's clearly the sensor is super sensitive and it's able to pick it up through the data captured on there. You know, how do you figure that out? What's your setup? Do you have a laptop nearby? Are you shooting, tethered into a laptop? Are you just kind of taking a few shots and then going back to, the truck and then importing them, seeing what you got, and then going back out, try to recompose?
So the benefit, like 15 years ago, nightscape imaging, this style of photography really didn't exist just yet because the cameras couldn't do the high ISO very cleanly. But now, looking back, going back to this, this shot was from 2015. So this is a straight raw out of the camera. So on the back of that LCD screen, you're seeing the Milky Way, and if you recorded any air glow. And for the colors to be accurate, I shoot with a daytime white balance. That's a very key thing. And of course, you can change the white balance to flavor your artistic style. Like some people like blue. For me, I want to record the night sky kind of as accurate as possible with the colors, especially with air glow. And a daytime white balance will allow you to achieve that. So, but you see that. I mean, you'll see these colors on the back of the LCD of your camera, and you'll know that you're well exposed if you see that as it is. Yeah.
Great. So Harry is joining us from Zoom, and I think Harry asked the question that I wanted to ask, and I wanted to know as well. So first of all, he said, very nice presentation. I agree, Harry. So we're in agreement there. But if you live in New York City, what photographs can you realistically take of the night sky? He said some nights during the winter, I can't even make out Orion's belt, which I'd have to agree with. We're lucky if we see the Macy's Day firework parade. So what are some tips to get some better photography in the cities?
So, I mean, obviously getting outside the cities is huge as it is. But you can use, I mean, if you have Orion and that sort of thing, I wonder maybe trying to be creative with like fog filters of like making kind of a constellation of the stars stand out a little bit more if possible. But that also might make the light pollution just kind of blurred more with your images. So if you can get out to dark skies, that obviously helps. Even just a little bit outside the city is just huge and beneficial as it is. So I think that's obviously a good recommendation. But you could use narrowband filters. Like if you get into more deep space astrophotography, you can put narrowband filters, and that's going to cut through the wavelengths of that light pollution and allow you to see some of the detail in the night sky. And that's using a tracker. Like you'd want to track the night sky and do those. But you can do amazing, beautiful shots of nebulae and all kind of cool deep space shots with a narrowband filter and like a small Spencer's camera has these little drop-in filters that you can use for that, like on Canon, if you shoot Canon. But filters could help for that, but there's no substitute for dark skies as always.
We're just going to have to move out of the city. That's it. That's it. It's giving us more reason to get out.
Yeah.
So talking about pollution a little bit, and this is something, we spoke about it before. We've had some different seminars and had some different people talk about astrophotography. And I think this always comes up is light pollution and the role it plays in, the environment. For normal people like myself who aren't, astrophotographers, from an astrophotographer's perspective, what do you think are some just basic steps that we can do to kind of help with light pollution and stop that and really, give back to allowing for a natural phenomenon like this to continue to happen so we can all continue to enjoy it for ages?
Yeah. I mean, one of the biggest things that the Dark Sky Association does is recommending, I mean, of course, if you have lights on that aren't necessary, I mean, you could put them on motion sensors, that sort of thing, so that they turn on only when they're needed. You can also, there's a lot of techniques that the IDA does of shielding. You can literally put lights, shields on like fixtures, so the light is only aimed down where it needs, because a lot of the times these light fixtures, as you might know, are kind of aimed up and they're illuminating portions of buildings or night sky objects. That's what causes this sky glow. This brightness in the night sky is these light fixtures that are kind of aimed not down and putting the light where it needs to be. But a lot of businesses, I mean, they're kind of the biggest culprits, and they just like putting out so much light because a lot of times they think it makes them feel more secure. And there's so many studies on this in general with light pollution, but putting your lights on timers, the motion sensors, and putting them off at night, that's definitely something that we can do. And of course, the grassroots efforts of trying to educate, businesses and those kind of folks that have the brightest lights. And that's kind of the most tricky slope to kind of work on, I guess, with dark sky protection. But using images to showcase what we could experience in the night sky, to show them what they're missing out on, I think is powerful. That's kind of one thing that we can do as astrophotographers.
So I guess you're not a huge fan of Times Square then.
I've yet to visit yet. I've been to the convention center and all that stuff there, but haven't been there. But it's like Vegas as well, and a lot of the lights. You get so many beautiful lights, but of course, it's like there's so many people on planet Earth that haven't seen the Milky Way or know that there's the Milky Way out there, to see like, hey, how can you see the galaxy that we live in? So you open up the eyes to people that if we would shut the lights off at night, we would see the Milky Way from cities if we would shut the lights off. But it's just, it's something nowadays that's very tricky to do unless there's like a blackout, like that happened on the East Coast right. Back in 2003 or something like that. And people saw the Milky Way and they got scared. They called in the police. There's stories of that because they didn't know what was bright in the sky.
The only Milky Way I really know living in the city is the candy bar. So, so that's the only Milky Way I've experienced, and it's delicious, but it's definitely not as beautiful as
visually stunning. Yeah,
that's it. So moving on to David. David wanted to know, what is the longest shot you can take without using a tracker and not get any star trials?
So it 100% depends on your lens and your camera. But if you're using a full frame sensor in like a 14 millimeter lens, you can kind of abide by, the rule of 500. You can divide it into it and it'll give you like, the estimated exposure length. So if you take the 500 rule and divide it by 14, you get, I think it's like 30 some or seconds thereabouts. And you do that with the same lens. So with a 50 millimeter, you have about 10 seconds, but I found that with certain cameras, I have about 8 seconds really before you get trailing. So that 500 rule kind of gives you a rough ballpark on where to start with, keeping star trails to a minimum, just a very little bit on them. But, with a 14 millimeter lens in a full frame sensor, a 30-second shot, you'll have just a very small amount of trailing. And that time goes down as you increase your focal length.
Excellent. So I think for my bag, when I pack my bag to go on my astrophotography trip, I think I'm going to throw a calculator in there just for myself because that's not my thing. Mathematics. I'm just going to divide, carry the dividends.
Yep.
Just to kind of follow up on that, Dave wanted to know also, do filters really help that much?
So it depends on what filter. And of course, I feel bad saying it, but there's no substitute for dark skies. There is not. You can get interesting color balance issues when you start using certain filters and the gradients in your images from light polluted areas. I dealt with it all when I was beginning, but it allows you to become a better editor because you have to work harder to clean up the gradients from the light pollution if you're doing like wide angle. And but there's certain filters nowadays. I mean, like I said, the narrow bands, if you're doing deep space, that helps cut through all this light pollution significantly. But of course, that means it's limiting so much of the light, so your exposures have to be longer. But I've been using the Spencer's camera. I was using like their Canon EOS R, and they have that EF to R adapter, and it has a slide-in filter drawer. So you can put in these narrowband filters. And I didn't shoot it with his exact one, but I did something very similar, and it allows the hydrogen alpha, this like red in the Orion area, to stand out so quickly. So those filters are huge and very helpful, and allow you to do some unique editing styles with it.
Awesome. Well, Matt, why don't we throw up one last time so everybody can find your info, so they can check you out and stay up to date on Instagram, the YouTube, any of that stuff, there it is. There's Matt's information, YouTube, Instagram, his website, which I'm sure I'll have all the information about all the upcoming trips you're planning.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you guys got questions, obviously reach out, and yeah, it's just a pleasure sharing some of the night sky shots with you guys.
Awesome. Well, Matt, it's been an absolute pleasure to spend the last hour with you and learn some great techniques. Look at some absolutely wonderfully beautiful images. So we really appreciate it. For everybody at home joining us, I hope you've taken at least a little nugget of something from here. We look forward to having everybody back here. This has been another virtual event space. See you on the next one.